Coming up on episode 73 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Doug Christie experiment. Kings are winning. They come off a win streak. Ben and I are going to talk about if we think it's sustainable. Then we talk over to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles dominated the Packers, or at least I think they did. But can they continue their success against the Rams, who people are talking really positively about? We'll break that down a little bit more. We do our final Chargers check-in of the season as we break down their wild card loss, and also do a rapid fire picks for our divisional round this weekend. All right, guys, with that being said, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Reds. Ben, how you doing?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, teams are winning. Life is good. 2025's kicking off with a bang, dude.
Love it.
So we got a lot to talk about, as you heard in the intro. It's going to be a mainly, Kings Eagle-centric podcast right now for today, but we got big news. Obviously, the last time, this past couple weeks, it's been, the NFL playoffs. We made our predictions last week. Feel free to go check those out for those, who want to hear how horribly wrong we were in round one for some of these games. And last time we spoke about the Kings was 2 weeks ago, and we were discussing the Mike Brown firing. And now since it's been a couple weeks, we've gotten a good sample size of Doug Christie, the interim head coach, and how this roster has looked over the past 10 games. So in the past 10 games, they are 7-3, with a 7-game win streak that just snapped against Milwaukee. But before we kind of break down the Milwaukee game in general and talk about that, we want to talk about just how the changes affected the team. So I want to throw this to you, Ben. I want to ask you what you think overall of the early impressions now that we kind of have a decent enough sample size now of Doug Christie and these guys playing for him. So what have you thought so far with the new change?
I think that the energy shift was definitely needed. And, at the time when we talked about this 2 weeks ago, it didn't feel like there needed to be this kind of an energy shift. We discussed how this was a move we didn't expect. This was a move we don't agree with. And here we are, 9 games later, and I still don't necessarily agree with the move. But in terms of the energy that this team is playing with on pretty much a night-to-night basis, and the kind of, the way that they're playing for each other is something that, I really haven't seen, and we really haven't seen from this team this year. And you can argue a majority of last year as well. So, this is something that you can kind of build off of. And especially now when you look at the West, 1 through 11 is you can get anywhere in that. It's essentially from 3 to 11, but those seeds are totally up for grabs. And at this point, to be still fighting for a top 6 seed, very much so in that fight, and to have the kind of energy they do, it's promising. So I like a lot of what's going on with the Kings right now.
Yeah, to your point, you said we're 2.5 games back from Dallas for that 6th seed. So that's how close things are. And right now we're the 10th seed. So it's weird that the Kings saved their season in the sense of, since this change happened, they went on that 7-game winning streak. Now we're right back in the thick of things, kind of in the sense of, okay, now we can calm down, control our destiny, and just focus on winning the game that's in front of us instead of stressing about, oh man, we have to catch up. So now we're back at 500, managing things. The Doug Christie change, I've liked what he's done so far. I think that when I think about specific players that have benefited the most from this change, I look at Malik Monk and I look at Keon Ellis. I do think Malik Monk I feel like there was, I think there's a sense that Malik Monk, and I think a lot of these guys kind of respect Doug, and Mike Brown kind of lost the locker room. I think that there was a sense that has to be the case. Otherwise, the way these guys have responded, it made it seem like Mike's message was kind of not getting to them anymore. They weren't playing as hard for him anymore the way they were. I think they find it easier with Doug. I think Doug kind of just simplifies the game and let them play ball. And I think with this style of offense where we have so many ISO-centric players, it kind of does allow them to flow a little bit more naturally. Now, is it sustainable? We'll talk about that in a second. But so far, I've liked what it's done. And then you're seeing guys like Keon Ellis get more run in a more consistent manner versus when Mike Brown, it always seemed like kind of a love-hate relationship with Keon. So it's good to see him get a good run. And now we're implementing Devin Carter, who's getting good minutes. So it's like we're starting to see kind of an identity and more of a rotation with Doug now. So so far it's been pretty good to see.
Yeah, and to kind of build off you there, Keon has been kind of the story for me in the biggest difference between Mike Brown and Doug Christie. If you look at from strictly a numbers perspective, Keon looks like our MVP. And that's, not to say that he's out here putting up the most points, the most rebounds or anything like that, but his impact while he's on the floor and the hustle plays, he has been a monster, and especially in the games that Doug Christie has taken over as interim head coach. And this was one of the pain points that you and I spoke about a number of times. A lot of Kings fans have talked about for the last year and some change is, why is Keon not getting the playing time that he deserves? And it's simple as that. He has deserved those minutes. And you saw with Mike Brown so many instances where he would play Keon for 15 minutes and then we'd get 10 terrible minutes of Kobe Jones. And it was like why is Mike doing this? Like, Keon has already in that game, just for a, example, he already has like 2 steals and a block and all these hustle plays. And he went he had 9 threes at one point this season, but he never earned your trust, Mike Brown. Look, I'm not hating on Mike Brown. I'm really not. I loved him as a head coach, but there were issues with his rotations. There were issues with some of the ways that he handled this team. That's not to say that Doug Christie has no problems. We've seen 9 games. It's pretty hard to judge a coach based on 9 games, and we'll get into that a little bit more here in a few minutes. But the Keon thing is a big point for me, and the fact that Doug is using him for as many minutes and demanding so much out of him. I mean, essentially from game 1 in that Lakers game, he has said Keon's going to be he's going to have a big role for us, and for me, he's going to be huge, and he has been. So this is, I love what's going on with Keon. We now have, depending on if De'Aaron stays in Sacramento, we now have a set backcourt starting and backing us up off the bench. You have De'Aaron Fox and you have Malik Monk, and then you got Devin Carter and Keon Ellis. You're
Exactly.
set. You're set. Like, that is phenomenal. I love that lineup.
Yeah, and coming into the year when we drafted Devin, I kind of imagined that that quartet was kind of going to be the main focus, and they made guys potentially like Kevin Hurt a little bit more expendable in that sense. Because these guys, Keon and Devin, can defend above their size, and they play really well with energy. I think Devin, obviously he's still a work in progress. He has some ups and downs because he's now just being inserted into the lineup and playing real NBA minutes. But I do think that we've seen it already, especially when you get a lineup of like Devin Carter, Keon Ellis, and Keegan Murray out there. The team defense kind of feels much more connected because these guys are just naturally such good defenders, and it's affecting guys like Domas. Domas is staying in front of his man a lot easier. I do think that the team defense, and this could be the Doug Christie factor too, is helping, and these guys are playing a little bit more connected. Now, do we, are we still struggling? Are we still giving up tons of easy baskets, tons of easy threes? Absolutely. But there is a sense of urgency that they kind of have been lacking throughout the earlier parts of the season with Mike Brown. So when we talk about, these guys, I like what we're seeing, but the question is now, do we think, this is just the new coach bump? Do we think that there's a chance that this could all still just eventually collapse on itself? Or do we think it's sustainable? I don't know how you feel if you think that we can keep this up, because since Doug has taken over, our offense has gone back to being one of the top 2, top 3 in the league, and our defense is, still middle of the pack, but it's, contributing, and we're making plays and using our defense to get offense. Do you think that we will be able to sustain this long term moving as the season continues?
There are a lot of signs that point to yes. There's obviously signs that point to no, but the biggest things for me are the ways that they have found to win these last, 8 games, essentially, really 7. But they've found different ways to win, whether it was double OT, scoring tons of points, and then DeMar DeRozan going, for 9 points in the second overtime to ice the game. Or it's on the defensive end, just a defensive monster performance against Boston in Boston. This team is finding gritty ways to win games. And even in the Bucks game last night, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes, even in that Bucks game, they go down big early, but there was fight really all game long. And you just see this constantly with this team under Doug Christie so far, where this team is never out of it. And that was already kind of the case with Mike Brown's unit, but it feels even more so with Doug because, well, we're winning for one, but for two, there's just a different energy that Doug is bringing to the court side, to that sideline as an interim head coach. And it feels different. And the way that these guys are playing, I tweeted something about it back, I think maybe 3 or 4 games ago, where I said something to the effect of this team is full of really great players that were playing really well individually, but now they're playing as a team and they're playing for each other. And that for each other is what great teams do. And that was something that I think was missing a lot during this entire season, was just this team not being able to put together a full game of consistency and also playing for each other. And that's just, it moves mountains when you're able to do that as a basketball team.
Yeah, and I think there were reports too when it came to the switch that the guys do appreciate that Doug Christie was a former NBA player. Like Mike Brown played when he was younger, he played in college and everything, but no true NBA experience. And I think that Doug is able to relate to these guys a lot more and his message seems a little bit more legitimate. Like, hey, we know. He's like, I was a defensive stopper in my time. Like, I can teach you guys how to be effective and physical. And I think there is a level of physicality that these guys are playing with too. And they're being aggressive. They're picking up the pace. They're just going back to the simple things that you can do to make your team a little bit more effective and control the tempo, control the pace. And when you're the ones dictating the tone, dictating the pace, it makes the game flow a lot smoother. And I think those are the positive things that Doug will continue to push. And I do think that itself is sustainable. The question is going to be is, our shooting has been much more consistent. Will we be able to keep that up? We've seen this team have the worst kind of shooting stretch ever. And I wonder, how much of that is lingering in their minds and the city's minds, because it doesn't feel like it's truly gone away yet. We do see these guys kind of settle sometimes, and those little things still happen. But overall, I'm liking what I see. And, the only things that I wish, would kind of stop is we do talk about these kind of games, like when we see the Bucks and even games like the Bulls, like we'll have a quarter or two, maybe like a quarter and like a half that are like awful, just terrible. Like the Bucks last night, we got outscored out, what was it, like 48-29 in the first quarter or something like that.
Yeah, it was horrendous.
Like, and then we play, and then all of a sudden we lock in and play exceptional the rest of the game. And it just sucks that it's like one awful quarter just defines the whole game, and you dig yourself in a hole you can't dig out of. And I just that's still the one thing that I think is missing from this team, is playing the full 48 a complete game. So that is something I'm still searching for, but I do think that Doug is getting the most out of these guys in the time so far that he's been in there.
So yeah, and I'm gonna kind of argue that in a way, because I have seen this team put together a full 48 a few times under Doug now.
Mm-hmm.
And in this last game against Milwaukee, I think it's being overlooked, just like, Brian Windhorst and the rest of that crew overlooked the rest of the Kings stretch here recently. Malik Monk was out for this game against Milwaukee, and he has been a spark plug to start these games under Doug for a number of them now, where we will kind of struggle to get some shots going, and then Malik will just run some pick and roll action, some two-man action with Domas, and all of a sudden we've got 6 quick buckets. And that was something that I felt was really missing in that first quarter. When I look at the breakdown of the game, we let Milwaukee score 47, which is just awful. I don't think Malik's going to help our defense, in that case. But right. I do think Malik could help us get 9 more points. We put up 26. We would have then had maybe, 35, let's say. Because I think with Malik, 35 points as a full starting lineup and the rotation is pretty safe. So the other 3 quarters of that game against Milwaukee, you tied them with 28 points in the second quarter and then outscored them in the other 2 quarters. So there was chances to win the game if you didn't have just a terrible start to the basketball game itself.
Right.
And that's something that I think that Malik effect was dearly missed in this one, because just the impact that he has immediately for every game is something that this team really relies on.
I do think with Malik, especially under Doug, he's turned into, I want to say like, I want to say he's the second option all the time, in the sense of like, no matter which one, no matter who's popping off, Malik is always there to complement them when he's on the floor. So if Domas is having an awesome game, Malik piggybacking off that. If De'Aaron's popping off, Malik's piggybacking off that. Same with DeMar. Malik is always that constant, and I think he's really embraced this role as a starter. He's making the most out of it. He's having a career year, and that's exactly what we were hoping for when we made that kind of change. And I think under Doug, he does feel a little bit more freedom. I think he feels a little bit more trust. Doug is coaching him up on defense. You're seeing the effort he's playing with on the defensive side. And I do think that, yeah, there's going to be mismatches all the time when we're as small as a group as we are. But if we play with the energy and hustle, we will make up for that in some spots. And I do think offensively, he's just a second point guard out there. His ability to pass the ball and run the pick and roll is much better than someone like Fox. You can just tell how much more natural Malik is in that situation, and I really do like having him out there. And he definitely was missed. I do think that people, that, like you mentioned with the Brian Windhorst, the pod, when they were talking about the Kings being successful, they were just trying to point out the fact that, a star was missing from this team, a star was missing from that team. And then, we don't get the same kind of grace when our player's missing. When in reality, Fox
Right.
was missing for a few games during the stretch with Doug too. And Malik was the number one shouldering the load as the point guard. And we didn't feel like we skipped, we missed anything with Fox. And I don't know if that's as much of an indictment on Fox as it is, the team playing well without him type of thing. That kind of conversation starts. But Malik has turned into that kind of connector, that important player. So then if you feature Malik, then you have Keon as our top tier role player. Those are the guys who you can continue, if you have at least one or two of them on the floor at the same time with defense, Keegan with his defensive consistency. Now it's just a matter of like, can we just consistently win like we have been? Can we keep this up? This is going to be the stretch. And now we just, we took a loss that was a little frustrating. Can we bounce back from that? I want to see the adversity that these guys are going to be facing. We're going to have a few tough games, but we've also, like you said, we've beaten Boston, we've beaten Memphis, we've beaten good teams in here. So I'm impressed so far, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself and say like, oh, the answer's here. This was it. Mike Brown was the problem. Doug is the solution. Like, it's working. And yeah, it's working now. So let's see if we can make a playoff push, and then we can decide, okay, then the conversation will turn into, can Doug Christie be the guy long term? Or is there an option that the Kings are waiting for? That remains to be seen. But that will kind of reveal itself a little bit more depending on the success of this team in a couple weeks.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about the next two games, because we're coming off of a loss in Milwaukee. We're back home. They're back home now. They're going to be playing the Rockets tonight, Thursday. And this is going to be a tough game. The Rockets are a really good team this year who have a lot of talent. They're a very fast-paced team, very similar to the 2022 Sacramento Kings. And from a roster building standpoint, in a lot of ways, they're similar to the Kings. So yes, the Rockets are second in the West, but I think the Kings have got a good shot at keeping up with the Rockets in this game, and could very well find themselves in a scenario to win this game. This is when Doug Christie took over and we got the first 3 wins. I texted you at some point and I was like, I want to see how this team responds after a loss. This is all great. This feels good. This is, what this team needed was a win streak of any kind. To get 7 of them, yeah, let's go. That's awesome.
Right.
But now we got the loss. And to be honest with you, I'm a little happy about it, because it made sense to the team we lost to. We lost to a team who is bigger, more athletic, a little bit better, better built. It makes sense. I'm okay dropping that game against Milwaukee. How do you respond? This is what I want to see. And this is what's going to kind of dictate my grade of Doug Christie as an interim head coach throughout the rest of this year, is how the team responds to adversity, not just in a game, but in a season. This team hasn't hit adversity with Doug Christie yet. They were in adversity when he took over. And since then, he's, found a way to help them win. How are you going to respond when the adversity hits with Doug Christie as head coach is what I want to see from this team. So I'm excited to see how they respond against the Rockets at home. You got the Wizards then on Sunday, and then on Wednesday of next week, you got the Warriors in your house. So you have a home stretch here to again start another win streak. It's not a tough ask to win at least the Wizards and the Golden State game. And if you can squeeze out the Rockets game, you're on another win streak that's going to be monumental heading into Denver.
Exactly. And so we can only hope, and it'll be interesting because now the reports are coming out. Now that we're winning, and even before we were winning, there are reports coming out like, listen, the Kings are going to try, are probably not going to make anything major move wise from here on out, and this is going to be the roster that they ride with. And listen, we talked about this, and I kind of want your opinion on this. We've had conversations with our friends and stuff outside of the pod, in terms of the expectation of this roster, right? I don't think it's unfair to say that this team should be in a better position than it is now. I don't think it's unfair to say this team should at least be in the top 6 given the roster that we had. I think the expectation this year was be a top 6 team. And it's been disappointing this whole time. And I still believe that they can get there, especially with how the West is kind of shaping out right now. I do think we kind of got lucky in that sense because when things were falling apart, we were very much out of it. But it just shows, in the NBA, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You can always recover before the first half of the season ends. But now it's kind of a prove it time. So do you think that it would be unfair to think that this team is still capable of being that top 16?
I don't. I mean, I just, this team, it's hard. We've seen so many years of failure and lack of success and just let down from this organization from a roster building standpoint and whatnot. We can get into it for years and years. But we, like you said, we came into this season as Kings fans all wanting a top 6 seed. It's still not, in my opinion, too much to ask of this team from a roster standpoint to be a top 6 seed, especially with the way that other teams around you are crumbling with injuries. And you look at Golden State, who started off as the hottest team in the league, and now they're suddenly regressing rapidly and begging their front office for changes, right? So do I think like this team should be a top 6 team even with all this happening throughout the season? Absolutely. Because the talent is there. It's 100% still there. You still got De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, Malik Monk, Keegan Murray. I can go down the list. Now you've got 2 monsters on defense in Keon, Ellis and Devin Carter. So we're still missing pieces. Mm-hmm. I don't agree that we should stand pat. I really don't, because the rosters, there's still an imbalance, a large imbalance. Look at what just happened in Milwaukee. We didn't lose that game because we couldn't shoot. We lost that game because we couldn't match up. We had Domantas Sabonis on Giannis because we didn't have a power forward that was big enough to even get close to Giannis.
Right.
And mind you, that's an awful comparison. That is one guy who you're not going to find another guy in this league who can really match up with Giannis well. But my point is that we run into Giannis's almost every other game. And that's the issue that we're kind of falling into. If this team isn't capable of outgunning other teams, which they've proved they haven't been doing very well this season, if you're not capable of doing that, even at this point, you need to invest in finding a wing who is good enough to carry that load. You have to invest in finding a backup center who has that defensive presence. Like, there is so many missing pieces that if the pieces we have invested in this season aren't forming and aren't coming together to stand pat at this trade deadline, I think Monty's job would be on the line at that point if we're not a top 16.
And it's interesting, right? Because it feels like now for the past few years, we've been having the same conversation of like, there are a few guys that were like, why don't we package this in a pick or two and maybe go for someone who can make this team better? But now the question for the organization is, okay, are there the options that we have out there? Is there anyone truly good enough that's worth sacrificing what we have now? Or are we going to play the long game? But at the same time, it's like, how many more years do we want to kind of, I don't want to say for waste would be wrong, but kind of the seasons let us pass by before making a move that we could have done a few years ago. So it's a
It
tough
is
balance.
wasting. I'm
Yeah.
going to interrupt you because it is wasting. You have DeMontis Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk who are all in their primes.
Yeah, no, it's totally fair. And it's interesting too because you look at some of these young pieces. Keegan is playing awesome on defense, but his offense has been gone this year compared to what he's been in previous years. And now with guys like Keon stepping up, like how big of a role does Kevin have down the road? Trey Lyles, he's a good role player to have, but then again, if like you package Kevin and him for someone who's a better fit, does that make more sense? Or so it's like, but the question is, what does Monty really want to do? And that's going to be the part that he's kind of just come out and said, we're not going to do anything. And that does make me a little bit nervous because we're going to run into situations where, yeah, we could probably go on another win streak, but we could also, on the other side of things, go on another losing streak, and then we're right back in the mediocrity spot. We're going to get a middle of the road pick and fail in the lottery like we always do, and then he'll probably draft another guard because that's all he's done for the past 3 years. So it's like it's one of those things where it's weird that this pattern kind of keeps repeating itself. But at the same time, if it's working right now with Doug, and I think maybe unfortunately, with like the con to the win streak is we might have tricked ourselves into thinking that this roster is kind of back to what we were hoping for, when in reality we're going to just ignore the red flags that we've seen. So it is a balancing act that I'm nervous to see kind of how we handle it in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm, most concerned of is being fooled into something that is simply just an energy shift. We just can't see another, essentially, like you said, wasted season like this. Because at this point, you're at the point where it's like you need to invest in making a good move. And if you're not doing that, then to be honest with you, it kind of makes sense to almost tank the season, not go get Cooper Flag. You're not going to get Cooper Flag. But this is a deep draft. And there are really good guys in the first 20 picks.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get up in the first 20, you're going to have a solid piece to build around for the future. And look, I can't even guarantee right now that with a top 6 spot in the playoffs, De'Aaron Fox would stick around. Nobody really knows, because are you really contending at that point? What if we're a first round? What if we're third in the West, Marcos? And we get into the, we're a lock in the playoffs. We have that home court advantage. We run into somebody who's not meant to be, in
the sixth
place.
Yeah.
Right. And we get steamrolled, or regardless, we just lose that first round. We're not contending. I can't guarantee that De'Aaron Fox is going to want to stay here. So then at that point, you lose a very valuable piece. You hope to, get something, but I don't know. It's a really touchy situation here in Sacramento, because it feels really good to go on a 7-game win streak. We haven't seen it in so many years. Well, I mean, we saw it in 2022, but it's a good feel, but it's nerve-wracking because you don't know how this season is going to shake down. You don't know what the offseason is going to look like, and you're not necessarily setting yourself up for the future if things don't pan out this season. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it would be unreasonable to say, oh yeah, we're totally going to build off of this. Like they've totally provided us with years of evidence that they can totally build off of this. They haven't. Like this is the longest win streak we've had since Mike Brown in 2022, and that's 7 games. Okay. Then what? We haven't consistently piled any sort of win streak this year outside of the 7-game win streak that saved the season. So it's like, if we do that this year, great. They're giving us another year, another sample of, okay, these guys can build something together. And maybe and then you focus on, okay, let's see if we can get some pieces in the off season. But I don't think it's unfair to say, like, yeah, the win streak's great and all, but is this really going to last? So this is going to be a very interesting test to see if Doug has the juice to get this team going, and if these guys can execute. Like it does come down to the players and executing on the floor, and they've been stepping up in big moments throughout this win streak. That's what separated them, and that's kind of what we were hoping for, is that we knew we were going to be in these tough games, and we were hoping our stars would step up, and in this recent win streak they have. So can they continue? That's going to be the question, and I'm really excited to see. But so far, Dougie's working out. Happy to see it so far, so let's see if he can keep it up.
Yes, sir. Go Kings.
All right, so that's enough on the Kings. I'm glad we got to talk about it. A lot has happened, so I'm very interested to see what happens in this next little stretch. We'll be back on them next week. So we are going to be right back. We're going to be talking some Eagles, so give us 1 second. All right, we are back to talk some Philadelphia Eagles now. We are coming off of a wild card win. For those who didn't check it out, my post game pod is up on the feed. Feel free to go check it out. I did an in-depth analysis of how I felt, breaking down just kind of the potential matchups I would have saw and kind of how it all worked out because we got a good matchup this week. But before we talk about this week, I wanted to talk about last week, and I wanted to start with my moments of the game. And listen, there's a specific tone I wanted to go with these moments of the game because there was a reason that we ended up kind of, despite a poor offensive performance, we stumbled on to 22 points. So the first moment of the game is going to be early in the third quarter, or late in the third quarter, actually. It was third down, third and short. Jalen Hurts audibles into a play, a call where an audible where he sees the blitz coming his way. The Rams are the Packers are blitzing. You can see it coming from a mile away. Audibles out, gets it to Dallas Goedert. A.J. Brown delivers an awesome block, and Dallas Goedert stiff arms his man, Kerry Valentine, all the way to the end zone for 20-plus yards. Super exciting play because when he was doing it, I was like, oh, man, he's not going down. Oh, go. And it was nice. Good moment for Dallas. And, always kind of one of those unsung heroes. He's kind of like the fourth or fifth option on this team, despite how talented he is. So it's good for him to have that moment in there. So then my second moment was the very first moment of the game, and it starts with the kickoff. Listen, I don't care what anybody says about who recovered the fumble. That's not the point. The point was Oren Burks lighting up Keyshawn Nixon and forcing that fumble in the first place and just starting the game off with a bang, saying, hey, we're here. You're in our house. We're setting the tone. Those are my moments of the game. And the reason I say that is because it was the Eagles' physicality. That's the strength of this team. We are just here to out physical you. It doesn't matter how ugly we play this game because we love ugly. We will play ugly. We don't play the way other teams do. So I was excited to see, obviously, come away with a win. We win by 12 points. How'd you feel, or what did you think while watching that game?
I thought you guys were playing a pretty broken team, honestly. The Jordan Love was horrendous because he was banged up in this one. I mean,
It
he
was
hasn't had
pretty
a great
clear.
year, but going into this, we talked about his arm being numb. It was clear that he was completely off, and there was a number of times where they would kind of get something going, and then he would just make a mistake. And it was, as much a physical issue with him as it was a mental issue. And this is kind of the growing pains of Jordan Love. Obviously you sign him to a massive contract like that because you're investing in him being that franchise quarterback. And I like that Tom Brady kind of held him to that standard throughout the game,
Exactly.
as he should when you're getting paid that much money. Okay, Brock Purdy. No, I thought overall the Eagles dominated that game defensively, but I mean, where it really got me was the Packers with 8 penalties for 85 yards, and a lot of them happening at just times that you don't have a penalty, at that moment, kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
And that's the reason. Like when I look at the Eagles putting up 22 points, I'm concerned because even with the defense that the Eagles have, I don't think 22 points beats the Lions. I think the Lions could still put up 27 on the Eagles. And that's kind of where I'm looking at Kellen Moore and I'm looking at Jalen Hurts. Look, the rushing game is always going to be there because of Saquon Barkley and that O-line is insane, right? Jalen Hurts really hasn't been there this season for me. I've seen a couple good games from him. He responded to one game where I was like, where I called him out and they came out and he himself had a really good game. But I don't know, was he still concussed in this one? Potentially. Was he shaking off rust? Definitely. But Kellen Moore, what the hell kind of play calls were those? I mean, he had lazy routes called for these receivers. I did not like what I saw on the route running. And when you have AJ and you have Devontae, who can easily cook man-to-man coverages and cook zone defenses, those are what you draw up. I'm not convinced with the pass game. And the pass game is what has to be on for me to feel confident the Eagles would be able to take down any and every team in the NFC and the AFC left in this playoff run.
So a fun little nugget on the Jalen Hurts side of things. I was listening to the Ringers Philly special, and Sheil Kapadia, who is a well-renowned member within the Philadelphia beat writer community, he's still writes for the team and stuff like that. But for him, he came up with this very cool stat. It's an advanced stat describing quarterback success rate, and he looked at all the playoff games in the wild card round over the past decade. And so there is a 224 quarterback sample. So 224 quarterbacks have played in this wild card situation. And when this was talking about quarterback success rate, and for those who don't know what success rate, because we don't really bring up all those advanced stats on this particular pod, success rate is basically a way to judge a quarterback's performance, or even an offensive player, defensive player's performance, defensive team's performance, based off of if that play was successful. And what that means is if it's a 3rd and 8 and the Eagles get a nine yards and a first down, that play is a successful play. But if it's the same thing, if it's a 3rd and 8 and the Eagles break off a 70-yard play, it's a successful play. So it takes away what, if you turn the ball over, it doesn't consider that. It's basically just saying positive plays. Is this play positive or was it not? And
wait, what if it's 3rd and 8 and you get 7 yards? Is it still considered positive?
No, because you didn't complete your objective there. So if it was like, so then on like, for example, if it's like 1st and 10 and you get 7 yards, that's a successful play because you're ahead of the sticks. Anything that converts the goal that you're trying to achieve, if staying ahead of the sticks or converting a first down or scoring a touchdown. But you don't get boosted like you would on like passer rating or DVOA for having a touchdown and no turnovers, or suffer as much if you got the interception. It just focuses on whether a play is successful or not. And out of these 224 quarterbacks, Jalen's performance was the 16th worst of those 224 quarterbacks. And the other 15 before him, every single game, every single team lost that game for the other 15 performances. So meaning the Eagles survived a game in which Jalen Hurts, in which the team shouldn't have won given the level of success rate. This is just another statistic showing that the Eagles are tough enough and win with their O-line, their D-line, their corners, and their run game, and they just out-physical you. And they have shown time and time again that Jalen Hurts, and this isn't even just this game, this has been the discourse of Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense throughout the entire season, has been, wow, when is this pass game going? This pass game is going to cost the Eagles a game. This pass game is going to cost the Eagles a game in the playoffs. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Maybe they are going to defy the odds. Jalen Hurts just needs to manage a game and not turn the ball over, and the Eagles will always have a chance to win the game. And I wanted to just and listen, that could be short-sighted. That could be very optimistic, right? And then when we talk about like what the other players think, everyone thinks like the discourse I was hearing about AJ Brown reading a book, which was a very hilarious thing because they acted like this was the first time AJ Brown has read a book. He has been documented multiple times throughout the season reading in between drives. But everyone decides to see what they get for the first time, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is the first time he's so bored. He's upset. He's reading a book." But when we talk about Jalen Hurts, he had a comment, and this is a tweet from Zach Berman, emphasizing, and Zach Berman's also a beat writer for the Eagles, so he interviews the guys all the time. So this was Jalen Hurts' comment regarding his role and the team, like if he needs to be better as a passer. And he says, "I think you guys need to understand that I don't play the game for anything other than to win. My role in each will be different. The approach in each game is different. Sometimes things are magnified a little bit more because there are less opportunities in certain areas. But ultimately, it's about winning the game. We're talking about playoff football." Everything that Jalen and this team has done this year has always been to win. And I also think that I don't think this is so much of a Jalen Hurts, the player, so much as I agree this could be a very Kellen Moore, Nick Sirianni scheme-based decision. Like after the bye week, they got together and you're like, you know what? Those 50-50 plays that we used to take risks on that were causing us turnovers early in the year and last year, maybe turn them down this year. Let's live to play another down because we're just going to beat the crap out of these teams by running the ball down their throat, even when we fail. I think another thing with this team is they're not afraid to fail. We see drives stall out all the time, and we're thinking, oh man, why can't they score here? Why can't they score here? The defense is going to let them down. And then the defense doesn't. The defense just shows up, makes a big play, and holds them on either whether it's a bad penalty or whether it's a sack or an interception or just stopping them on third down. The defense has been the number one defense in the league. And I think that's also the confidence in the Eagles defense that Sirianni's like, okay, if we just don't turn the ball over, don't give other teams extra possessions and control the time of possession, we have the best chance to win every single time because we are more physical on both offensive and the defensive lines, and we can control the pace. Does that mean that but that also doesn't mean, like we saw it in Pittsburgh, Jalen and this offense can throw the ball. And I do think there is he was healthy. I mean, as far as we know, we don't know if he was concussed or if he was truly cleared or whatever, but in the sense of like, does he still have lingering symptoms? Sure. But I do think he was shaking off rust when he hadn't played for a month. I do think the rhythm was disrupted. And that team, like when I look at this team, it's always there for me. This offense is always capable of throwing the ball when it wants to. But I think that because we've always been such a run-centric team, but we've never had a back that can complement us complement the offensive line the way Saquon has this offensive line this year. And it still works. Like when something works and teams do everything they can to stop you and they still can't stop him, why would you go away from that? And I just think that when it comes down to it, Jalen still makes big plays. He still hits big throws in those moments. He's still incredibly efficient. In the past 3 weeks that he has started and finished a game, he's had over 110 rating. It's not like he's holding this team back. He's just efficient on less attempts. And I don't think that's an indictment on Jalen Hurts, the player, for being a game manager. And when we watch the Eagles play, Jalen is in complete control of the offense in terms of how he's dictating, calling audibles, calling screens or blitzes that he sees in the way, and he's in control. I never feel out of control with Jalen. Does it always look pretty? No. But that doesn't mean I don't think that these guys are capable of breaking something off. And I do think that the game plan last week was to ease Jalen into it. And yeah, it was going to be simplistic concepts that maybe the Packers were prepared for. But I do think that they're going to, as the weeks go on, they're going to progressively dig deeper into their bag and get more creative because they're going to be aware that we're going to talk about the Rams game in a second, but like that these teams are going to start selling out in the playoffs, taking more risks to stop Saquon Barkley and dare Jalen to beat them. And I'm really excited for when teams want to challenge Jalen because I do think he's going to come through.
Yeah. So, all that makes sense. And it was a really great breakdown from your side of things. But for me, I'm kind of stuck in the past. When I look at, I don't want to say last season, because last year we talked about that collapse is just really a one-off scenario. So I'm not going to use last season at all. But the early stages of this year, when they were trying to figure out the identity of this team, because this team did have an identity issue to start the year. Were we a pass-heavy offense? Are we a run-heavy offense? What does our defense look like? There was a lot of questions going into the season. When the identity was trying to be found with this Eagles team, Jalen was making mistakes and he was turning the ball over. And I don't remember what week it was. I think it was 3 or 4. You came on the pod and I think it was a post game, and you said, I just have to come out and come to a realization that this team is mid and that Jalen has a turnover problem. But then, like you said in your breakdown just a few minutes ago, something happened after the bye week where they are they asking Jalen to take less shots? Are they shifting completely to run the ball down every team's throats, regardless of the looks that they're giving you? Because we have seen Jalen not throw the ball and not take those shots. And we talked about it, I think like 5 or 6 weeks ago, how Jalen missed so many wide open receivers. I don't think his vision is bad. What I think is that you are 100% right. This team is not. They're asking him to not take those shots because he simply can't necessarily make those consistently. And that's, to me, concerning because, like you just said, teams are going to send everything they have and sell out to try and stop whoever is on the other side of the ball, regardless whether it's the Eagles, the Bills, whatever. You sell out to stop the strength of the other team. The strength of the Eagles is so well known. It's Saquon Barkley and the O-line. It's so well known. The question for this team is what that pass game looks like. Because the early implications of the season and at various times throughout this year, you've questioned if the pass game is strong enough to lead this team to a Super Bowl. That is going to be the only reason why the Eagles don't win a Super Bowl this year, is if the pass game lets them down. Because everything else with this Eagles team leads me and leads a lot of people to believe that the Eagles have everything it takes to win the Super Bowl. That defense is as elite as it gets. It's safe to say at this point they are the best defense left in football, arguably the best defensive team throughout the entire season, but they're the best defensive team left in football. On the offensive side, that running game, arguably the best offensive running game left in football. So, not even arguably. It's not an argument. So, the question is just that passing game, which you will have to win a game, whether it's this game against the Rams or the NFC Championship against X, Y, or Z or the Super Bowl. One of those games, one of the 3 games, you will have to win through the air. Because like you said, one of those teams is going to sell out and stop Saquon Barkley somehow, some way.
Yeah, and then to counter the argument in the sense of, I think the people have this discussion as if the Eagles can't. And I that's the part that always baffles me, and that's the part that I keep circling back to, is the sense that they've shown us that they can do it. Just because they don't do it every single week doesn't mean that they can't do it. And again, I do think there's such a recency bias when people talk about this particular game that's coming up with the Eagles and the Rams. People are like, oh, the Rams are extremely hot right now. You know what happened the last time they were extremely hot? They ran into the Eagles. Jalen Hurts only threw for like 150 yards, and Saquon ran for 255 yards. This team is different. This team wins in a very old school manner, early 2000s, where the defense controls the game, the run game controls the game, and Jalen just has to execute. And he's been doing that this entire time. Since the bye week, we are 12-0, including the game against Green Bay. When Jalen Hurts starts and finishes the game, the only game we lost was when he got out with the concussion. Like, not to mention, it's not like he's been statistically holding us back either. Listen, the passing yard totals are they're low. Absolutely, I'm not going to deny that they're not low. But the dude has 30 touchdowns and 3 turnovers in 11 weeks. It's not like he's not being productive. He's making the most of the opportunities. When the defense forces a turnover, gives him a short field, he scores. He scores a touchdown. So he's executing in the moments where we need him to the most. Our drives stalling out sometimes because we do commit to the run 60% of the time. Yeah, but that's also a sign of, hey, that wears a team down defensively. Like, teams always start off kind of well against us. I think this is kind of like the slow start debate is the Eagles are running into fresh bodies right away early in the game. And teams are going to start stronger on the defensive side because they're fresher. But then when the Eagles consistently just run into you, and then even if it's a drive where, okay, we're going to try and let Jalen, get a first down on this 3rd and 8. Okay, it didn't work. Our defense will stop you, and we'll come back and do it again. And it's just we don't change our game for anyone. We make everyone else play our game. We make everyone try to stop the run. If they're going to sell out for the run, we're going to let AJ win this one route, or Devontae win this run route, or Goddard's going to break off a big run. It happens. So I think that the star power that the Eagles have isn't meant to say, hey, we have the star power to throw the ball 40 times a game. We have the star power to execute in the moments that matter the most. And I think that's where this team separates itself in a way where it doesn't need to be flashy like Detroit. It doesn't need to put up 60 points or, that's an insane number, 40 points to win in a shootout, because this defense doesn't put themselves in a position to be in a shootout. And I do think the Washington game that we lost was, again, a little bit fluky because we were in complete control of that game until Jalen went out. So it's one of those things where Jalen has managed the game so well that we are just always in control. We're always bleeding off clock, and we are set up to execute when it matters most. And I just think that, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that this recipe, this 130-yard performance will get us to the Super Bowl. It's not going to. But I don't think that this is the performance we're going to get next. I don't think this is a performance we're getting this weekend or moving forward if we were to face the Lions. So I'm just confident that this team can do it. Will it ultimately cost them a game? It probably will be the reason that they lose. But I think it's just everyone's just jumping to that conclusion so quick because they just haven't seen this offense isn't the explosive offense that's made them so popular over the past few years. They're doing it through the ground. And I don't know. I just think people it's easy to say this for Jalen, and then they ignore the numbers of the fact that he's constantly winning and he's constantly leading this. Like winning is a team stat. I agree completely. Like the defense has helped them out significantly, but he has to be a part of that. Him not turning the ball over, him executing when we get into the red zone, that matters. You can't just say that he's just not, that it's all Saquon, because it's not. It hasn't been. So I understand where people are coming from, but I just think, to me, it's a hilarious argument, because that just shows that they're just taking the stats. And when we get into the playoffs, stats go out the window. It's just about who can get the job done in the moments where it matters most. And this team has done it over the past 3 years. They're one of the few teams that there haven't been many teams outside of the Chiefs that have won more than the Eagles in the past 3 years. So their recipe works, and I'm excited to so let's talk about the Rams game. And I want to talk about the Rams side of things here, because the Rams they've been playing well. Right? They obviously finished the season 10-7. They had a very good showing against the Minnesota Vikings on Monday. The emotions were running high with all the fires and everything happening for them. They played in Arizona, and Arizona did a wonderful job hosting and making it look as much like SoFi as possible. I thought the environment was really cool. Great win for them. But then I talk about the recency bias. And when I'm listening to people talk about this game, they're like, "Oh, the Rams are so dangerous. Look at that offense. Look at this defense. They got 9 sacks on Sam Darnold and that garbage offensive line that was missing their best offensive lineman." Like, I get it. But week 12 was 2 months ago. And when we talk about the Rams defense specifically, because I do think the Rams defensive front has been the strength of this team in recent weeks. This defensive front, full of the last year's first round and second round picks and this year's first round and second round picks, have been awesome. Jared Verse is having the rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year season. Braden Fisk is awesome. Kobe Turner, and I forget Bryce Young. I think that's his name. Those guys have been awesome. But the problem is they haven't changed, and the Eagles' offensive line hasn't changed. The Eagles' offensive line dog walked these guys their first matchup. And to just assume like, oh man, but schematically they changed. They're going to run stunts here and everything like that. That's not going to make a difference against a Philadelphia Eagles team that runs the same 3 run concepts and knows how to counter teams that try to run different things against their run concepts. Because when you're only running a particular amount of plays, there's only so many counters teams can throw at you. So I just, to say that all of a sudden this team is going to be able to stop the run without having to commit 7 to 8 bodies in the box, even though they did that last time and it didn't work, it's going to be really tough. I think the Eagles present too many problems for this Rams defense, that although they've been playing better and playing with energy, there's just a lot working against the Rams this week, which is why I was saying that this was going to be the best draw of the 3 teams, because the Rams were going to be in a tough spot because they're getting less rest. They're coming from the east to the west. They're dealing with their own personal drama in LA. They went home on Tuesday, and they're talking about, going back to their houses or whatever's left of them and helping their families. And you have to do that. And then you're flying down to Philly on Friday. They're not even in Philly. They're going to fly down on Friday, prep on Saturday, and then you're playing a game on Sunday. It's just hard you're coming to the most hostile environment in the league. For all those who saw that viral fan altercation, you're coming into the most hostile place in the league, and they don't care. The Eagles fans don't care. And not to mention, when we played in SoFi, it was more Eagles fans than Rams fans anyway. That's usually the case when you go to SoFi. And then to have Matt Stafford come out here, play in the cold. It's going to be 37 degrees, and there's going to be on and off light showers, so it's going to be raining. The weather's not going to be pretty. And to just think that these guys are going to come in and having this explosive offense, even though they only scored 3 total touchdowns because they got gifted that scoop and score. Like this offense has been good. Puka has been awesome. The Cooper Kupp has regressed. They are not that dynamic. The Eagles did a very good job on Matt Stafford in this team last time, and they have all the pieces to do it again, even though Nakobe Dean, who now in the post game, I didn't know the extent of the injury, but he's out for the rest of the playoffs and potentially early into next year with a torn patellar tendon in his knee. That's awful. Like, sucks. It sucks. He was, him and Zach Bond were the best linebacking duo in the league this year, And, listen, we have Oren Burks and Jeremiah Trotter. That's going to be hard to replace a player like Dean, who is our green dot, who's the one who gets the plays called to him, and he leads this defense. But I don't think it's as much of an impact as that we're all of a sudden just going to suffer and fall off a cliff without him, when we still have Zach Bond, Jalen Carter, all of our corners, and our back end with Gardner Johnson and Reed Blankenship. We have enough depth to win without Dean, but it sucks that he's gone. And I just think this Eagles team presents way too many problems on both sides of the ball. And I compare the Rams to the Packers in the sense that, like, the Eagles are just a tier above this team. They should win this game. Like, it would, for me personally, and I don't think this is such a hot take, it would, and I think a lot of Eagles fans would feel the same way. It will be more disappointing if we lose this week to this Rams team versus had we lost last week to that Packers team. Because I think there's a sense the Packers team has proven that they have been the more complete team, despite them finishing poorly to finish the year with injuries and all that crap. But the Rams they were a bottom 10 defense all year. The only thing they were really exceptional at was getting pressure, and they just don't put themselves in that kind of position. This offense was a middle of the road offense with all these stars that are aging outside of Puka. He's obviously young, but it's just, there's a lot working against the Rams. And that's why I'm confident in the Eagles. And I also am confident in the fact that, like, Jalen doesn't, the same situation. He doesn't have to play insane to win this game. He didn't have to play insane to beat them last time. He just has to be efficient, not turn the ball over. That's been my motto for Jalen Hurts all year long since the bye. Don't turn the ball over. We're winning games. That's been the recipe. We've won the turnover battle every single week. And that's just how we've dictated the tone. And when the Packers played us last week, the Packers are a cold weather team, right? The Rams are coming in, playing in the confines of a dome, to just come into Philly. It's just going to be a tough ask for them to do it. Can they do it? Absolutely. They are dangerous enough to do it. It's just this week, after everything they've been through in the past 2 weeks, the Rams, I don't see it.
So you made some really good points in there. The best point was the Eagles should win this game. And for me, I wouldn't take the Rams 1 time out of 10 against the Eagles, to be honest with you. And the biggest thing for me in this one is, whether it's the run game or it's the pass game, whatever the case may be, I needed to see them put up more than 22 points, because this offense is more than capable of doing so. And if they go out there and they don't put up more than 21 points or whatever the case, if it's not, a decently high scoring game from the Eagles side of things, I'm going to be concerned for the reasons that you just said. Now, with that being said, yes, the Rams were a bottom tier defense, a bottom 10 defense for the vast majority of the season. And it was, is a mess for them in a lot of ways. But since letting the Bills put up 42 points on them, they've only let one team go over 10 points. And that was week 18 against the Seahawks, when they sat everybody down and Jimmy G was their quarterback. Like, the defense has found a stride, and that cannot be overlooked, because, yes, the pressure is 100% coming from the defensive line and those edge rushers who have found a stride with their youth that's going on there. And by the way, just a quick nugget, the Eagles obviously are the number 1 youngest team in defensive team in the NFL. Well, the Rams are the 3rd youngest team. So a lot of youth on the defensive side of things here. So shout out to both squads. Obviously, the Eagles being a dominant defense all year long. But the Rams have found a stride on defense, and they've found a way to, yes, generate that pressure, but also be able to get quarterbacks to be looking in various different directions and be confused in the pocket, which has generated a lot of sacks for them and a lot of mistakes on that side of things. And this is why I'm like, regardless of whether you're pounding the rock or you're throwing the ball, I need to see the Eagles put up more than 21 points. This, to me, is kind of a stepping stone. This needs to be like a practice game for the Eagles. You need to get your woes out of the way in this game, because you should be winning this game. Even if you turn the ball over twice, you should still probably be winning this game. You need to get that out of the way now, because putting up 21 points, 22 points against what's most likely going to be the Lions in the NFC Championship isn't going to get it done.
For sure.
It's just not.
Absolutely.
And so That to me is what I'm focused on this week. Like I said, I'm not taking the Rams to win this game, not even one time out of 10. It's 10 times out of 10 I'm taking the Eagles. And it makes sense why the Eagles should win this game from top to bottom. But I need to see how dominant of a win it is for the Eagles. And I know that's a weird ask in a playoff game, but that to me is how much momentum are you carrying into that NFC Championship game? Because you're not going to be at home unless barring an upset, right?
Right.
Like, and obviously you have games to go, but I don't know. That's the biggest thing for me is you got to get through this game. You've got to, like you said, don't turn the ball over. If Jalen Hurts is asked to throw the football, in places and areas where he doesn't normally, if he's asked to do things that are outside of what his ask was in the regular season, he needs to be safe with the football. And as long as he takes care of the football and you guys win the turnover battle, like I fully anticipate Stafford's going to make a mistake and throw a pick because of the amount of pressure that he's going to see from that Eagles D line. And aside from that, the line, like the defensive backs, the cornerbacks, just ate against the Packers. Like they're hot, they're feeling good. That secondary is feeling really good going into this game. You don't think they're going to take it personally going up against guys like Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, especially Cooper, who in Week 12 was shell shocked by Cooper DeJean. Like this is a big game for the Eagles, and whether it's supposed to be an easy game or not, you need to go out and lay your foot down and like kind of instill that force and make people feel like this team is actually something that's to be messed with when it comes to the Super Bowl.
For sure. And then, so again, a lot of the discourse for this game is, oh, the Rams have the better coach and the better quarterback in this particular situation. That'll always give them a chance. And there's a couple little nuggets I want to talk about here. On first things first, they did this nugget on Sean McVay. And there was a stat that said that had Sean McVay's record versus the team he lost in the regular season that he ended up playing again in the playoffs. He's 6-0 in those situations. But then when you look at the Eagles playing their 7th divisional game at home, all time with the franchise, we are undefeated. We are 6-0 in divisional home playoff games. So both those little nuggets will get tested. Last time this happened was the Pittsburgh game with Russ, and we all kind of know how that happened. So it was really good feeling. But I don't know, man. The last time the Rams played a outdoor divisional playoff game was back in 2020 during the weird COVID year, but they played the Packers with Rodgers and they got destroyed. And
Exactly.
they're not really in those situations. So and again, to come to Philly is this is just going to be a tough environment. And again, I understand that this Rams defense is playing well, but one thing that has consistently just been dominant for the Eagles is that offensive line. And we saw exactly what they did to them the first time. I agree that this defensive line is going to struggle. Is going to make an impact if we put ourselves in 3rd and longs. That's their strength. That's exactly where they want us to be. But I'm just think that the Eagles, I don't think they're going to put up 255 rushing yards. That's extremely unreasonable to think, but I don't think it's unfair to think that Saquon can't easily have 150 in this game because schemes hasn't changed. Maybe for the Rams, they're going to put probably a few more stunts. They're probably going to try and get more in the box and dare Jalen to beat them. And I'm comfortable with that. I think I'm one of the few people that are comfortable with that and believe that he can do it consistently enough, even if he's throwing 25 passes. But even if they do stack the box, the Eagles are still going to run it. And I'm not concerned with if our offense is going to do enough. I do think that, again, last week it's just it's hard for me to gauge because of Jalen Hurts not playing for a month. That has to mean something. You can't just expect him to come in here and be insanely awesome. And I thought he did enough to win us that game and get himself into a rhythm and get used to being back in the flow of things. So I do think we're going to see a lot better. I do agree with you that if you're going into next week with the Lions, this is the game where you kind of want to see progression of any kind. So that we can't play the way we did against the Packers because we could still probably win if we played that same way. But then again, to take that level of momentum into Detroit, we're not going to be in a good spot. So I agree with you in that sense. So I think when I think about this game, I think the defense is going to just continue its dominance. I do think Matt Stafford's going to feel the weather, the pressure, the environment. It's not that he's not a veteran quarterback who hasn't been in this situation, but this is a situation he hasn't been in a long time. So it's one of those things that I just don't see it happening. And I also think the Eagles are going to take a different approach to how they defend these receivers. I do think we're going to see a lot more double teaming on Puka, considering he was the only one who could make any true damage the last time they played. Puka had 119 yards on 9 catches because they were just trying to funnel targets to someone who was getting open. And I do think Puka is going to get his, but I do expect a different level of coverage. And I think they're gonna take their chances with Cooper Kupp because we can put Cooper DeJean on him and we have 4 good corners who can line up on the outside and don't get beat that often. So this Fangio defense is going to do its part, and I think this D line is going to eat again. Like Brandon Graham was a huge piece last time they played in Week 12, and that was obviously the game he tore his tricep and was out for the season. But Nolan Smith has come into his own since that point. He's evolved into a player that's extremely useful and has kind of found his strength. So I'm really excited to see how he does, how Josh Sweat does. We have the lineup to disrupt, especially the interior with Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, and Jordan Davis. Like that rotation is dominated so far in the past recent weeks. So I'm confident in the Eagles' overall talent. I think we just have too much talent for this Rams team to handle. And the fact that it's at home, we're rested compared to them. And it's just like the situation of it all. I just think it favors the Eagles so much. And I don't think it's an indictment on the Rams. I don't think that it's going to be disappointing if the Rams lose this game either because of everything that they've been through and winning last week against a Vikings team that people thought like, yeah, they could win, but that felt a little bit more closely contested in terms of the opinion of both teams going into the game. So I think getting that playoff win, given everything they've been through this season, is a win for the Rams. But for the Eagles, it would be very disappointing if we lose, and that's going to be the part where I think the Eagles will just they're going to play with urgency, and they're ready. They want to go to the NFC Championship game. They want Detroit. They want the next toughest matchup. They don't care. So I think the Eagles win this game pretty soundly. I think it's going to be 34-21 Philly.
That's what I need to see. That score. And I have a very similar. I have 30 something. I have 30 points. Let's just say 30. And I think the Rams put up about 21 points. I think 3 touchdowns doesn't seem too crazy. It'll be like a garbage time touchdown probably from Stafford and co. But I need to see a 30 bomb. I mean, I really do. Personally, I don't remember the last time I saw the Eagles put up a 30 bomb outside of the game with Pickett.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I just haven't seen an explosive game out of that offense in a number of weeks. I've seen explosive games out of Saquon Barkley, but that's what I want to see I want to see a explosive game from the entire offense, something that you can really build off of going into Detroit.
And I think that we will. So I'm excited to see it. There's a lot of discourse with this team, and I'm really excited for them to just do what they've been doing all year and just proving the narratives wrong, stepping up when people doubt them the most. I think this is a big A.J. Brown game. We have Devontae Smith this time. We didn't have him in Week 12. That's going to add another element that they don't have the same level of preparation for. In the Sirianni era, we're 2-0 against the Rams. We're in a good spot. I don't understand where people think that this Rams team is all of a sudden better than Philly or has just as good of a chance. They're 6.5-point dogs for a reason. I think that Vegas respects the Eagles and what they bring to the table and their physicality. This could be another body bag game for the Rams if the Eagles set the tone. So, and that's the thing. When you have the Eagles fans around, this defense is going to set the tone, and this offensive line is going to set the tone. So I'm not nervous. I'm confident. I'm beyond confident in this matchup because for the Rams, they're a good team, but they're one of those teams that just doesn't match up well with our strengths. I think we're just a step above them. So that's where I'm confident. But again, playoffs, any given Sunday, anything can happen. This Rams team is dangerous. I will give them that level of respect, but I'm confident enough in this team that I think the Eagles will get the job done. So we'll see. All right. So I did want to do one last thing. We have to, for the sake of the fact that Wildcard weekend was last week, but let's push on to our final Chargers check-in of the week. So unfortunately, the Chargers kind of went out with a whimper, and they were entering the postseason with momentum, and we thought it was a good matchup with Houston, and Houston decided to put the clamps on them and force Herbert into 4 picks, and Harbaugh had to take blame. It was ugly. So now the discourse in the offseason is going to be like, is Herbert really the guy? And so what did you think? Obviously it's disappointing, but was there what stood out to you in a loss like this? Is there anything to take away? Is there anything they can build from? Are you still confident in this team moving forward in the future?
Look, it was already a successful season for the Chargers. Just to be able to ink an a playoff spot after a 4-win season the season before. To get to the playoffs like this, the first year with Harbaugh, you got something to build off of, and that's all you could really ask for. Just to give yourself a shot at the playoffs was something that I think this organization would have asked for, out of anything. So to be in the situation they are, and as far as the interceptions and the really poor game, because that's what it was, a really poor game from Herbert, I don't think it's too much to read into, because it was Herbert's first playoff game with Harbaugh. And I know that, it's like, well, he had 17 weeks before, blah, blah, blah. I get that. I get it. But playoff football is different. And Herbert is not really used to playoff football yet. I can't remember. I think it's been 1 or 2 times that he's seen the playoffs, and both were quick stints. So he still doesn't have a lot of playoff experience. I almost kind of look at him like Jordan Love. Like, yeah, Jordan Love has some wins in the playoffs, but he hasn't gone deep in the playoffs. He hasn't, had a lot of adversity in the playoffs. There's growth still to be made and to be had from Herbert and from that team, and even from Harbaugh. So as far as the offseason plans, Harbaugh being Harbaugh, one of the first things he addressed was he's going to have 2 procedures done during this offseason, one for his heart and one for his hip replacement. So prayers up to Harbaugh. Hopefully all those go really well for him.
Yeah.
And he's back better than ever. But as far as the kind of moves and the stepping stones that they need to look for going into the offseason, they really need another high-end receiver. And there's going to be guys out there. I mean, T. Higgins is somebody that, for any Chargers fans who are listening to us, keep your eye on T. Higgins and specifically with your team, because I would not be surprised if the Chargers make a run at T. I wouldn't be surprised if, with Tyreek Hill over in Miami being all disgruntled, I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers take a run at him as well. So there's options on that front, but I think I need to see an elite wide receiver land in LA for the Chargers to really complement that offense a little bit better. And on top of that, as does the Niners, they got to build that O-line. So
yeah, for sure.
A little bit of work to do, but look, man, it was a good season for the Chargers, and it was a ton of fun following them.
Yeah, and I think, again, the Harbaugh effect, I don't think can be stated enough, and I do think that level of coach brings people aboard. I think people see what Harbaugh's doing, and they're like, oh, yeah, I want to play for this guy. He has that kind of energy to him. Everyone raves about him. That'll help. So I do agree that there's going to be free agency options for them, and they'll have the cap space to work with. And not to mention, their own guys are going to get better. There was growth with these young players. Quentin Johnston had an up and down year, but he finished extremely strong. Can he continue? Ladd McConkey looked great. Now it's a matter of, can he get a little stronger and hang in there for more games so he can avoid some injuries. But they looked good. Like, I was wrong about them all. Like, going into the season, you were definitely dead on with them. And yeah, disappointing loss, but the Texans have an awesome defense and they showed up, and and they have experience too that the Chargers didn't have. I think people were, and us included, were probably sleeping on the Texans a little bit given how they finished the season. And it was a good game by Houston, but I think that LA definitely has a lot that they can do, and it'll be interesting to see how their offseason goes. But that was our Chargers check-in, and we're probably not going to be able to get them next year because they're probably going to be favored to make a playoff run next year too. So it'll be interesting to see who we get as our third team next year, who convinces who this time around. It'll definitely be interesting. But that was our finals Chargers check-in of the year. Sucks, it was disappointing, but it was a fun run. It was a good ride. So, Chargers fans should be proud and, excited for what's to come.
Yeah, and shout out my Uncle Jeff. I was high on your team because I love you, bro. I appreciate you, love you. Go Chargers.
Bolt up, baby. So
that's it.
So I think we're gonna finish off here, but I wanted to surprise you real quick with just some rapid fire. Pick your winners for this weekend. Baltimore or Bills? Pick your winner.
Bills, man. I just think the Bills have got it a little bit more together right now. I feel a little bit better in them, and I think they really need that AFC Championship rematch.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be Baltimore. I think it's gonna be a tough one. It's gonna be this one's the game of the week. I'm excited for. That's the game everyone's gonna tune into. No doubt. Commanders, Lions. Who do you got?
It's the Lions. I really don't think it's going to be close. The Lions are coming off the rest, and obviously Jaden Daniels. He outplayed what my expectations in his first playoff game. He did really well, and that Commanders team played really well. But to ask them to do the same thing against this Lions team is going to be asking a lot. So good luck.
Let's go commies! I'm rooting hard for them this week. I want an NFC Championship game in Philly, and I kind of want that round 3 rematch. But I mean, at the same time, ready for Detroit. I do think Detroit's going to win this game, but history does say that Jaden actually has a legitimate chance. So we'll see how that works out for them. And then we already did the Eagles Rams, and then do you think Houston has a shot of upsetting the Chiefs this week, or do you think it's just going to be a dog walking?
They have a shot, by all intents and purposes. When I look at the Chiefs team, this is probably one of the worst 15-win teams in a number of years. I might even argue in NFL history by the amount of games that they won by last second, heroics or non-heroics from the other team. So, by all intents and purposes, I would genuinely pick the Texans, but playoff Chiefs is it's just different.
Yeah.
It's just so much different than the regular season. Like, I'm genuinely curious. I'll be watching that game really closely to see how much different the Chiefs look.
Yeah, how prepared the playoff Chiefs are. They're a different animal. It'll be definitely interesting to see, especially since they know they only have 2 games to get back to the goal that they are so used to getting to. So yeah, that'll definitely be fun. So we got a fun divisional round weekend. We're really excited. But guys, we will end this here. This was episode 73 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social medias that are located up above for all you audio listeners out there. The links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, follow, review the show. Give us a comment who you think is going to win this weekend. Do you think the Rams have a legit shot? Do you think the Eagles have a good shot? For you Kings fans out there, do you think the Mike Brown, do you think the Doug Christie experiment is working? Do you think we can sustain it? Is our pessimism, maybe a little short-sighted, or do you guys believe in this team more than we do? We'll see. But please, guys, we appreciate all the love and support. We're growing with you guys each and every week. It's been a pretty fun 2025 to start. We've been growing at a rate that we're excited to see how we end up finishing at the end of this year. So we really look forward to it, guys. But I have been Marcos Conan. Beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet Reds.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace.